Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Professor Sides, and this course is Principles of Macroeconomics. This is Chapter 4, the Market Forces of Supply and Demand. Again, just a reminder that this is the longest chapter in the textbook. It is also the most important chapter in the textbook because this is our introduction to the principles or the foundational tools for the study of economics. Remembering that the study of economics is the study of behavior or market interaction. And we discussed in our previous lecture that the market consists of buyers and sellers, that the market can be highly organized like Wall Street, or it can be very loose like eBay or Amazon.com or Craigslist. In our previous lectures, we spoke to the demand side, the buyer side, and now we're going to speak to the supply side. And after we speak about the supply side, then we will bring both together, the buyer and the demand, the buyer demand and the seller supply side, and then we will discuss the interactions between them. When we talk about supply, the law of supply is about the relationship between price and quantity. Remember, the law of demand is also about the relationship between price and quantity, but it's from the buyer side. The law of supply is the relationship between price and quantity from the supply side. And we talk about supply or quantity supplied. And remember, when we see quantity supplied, which is represented by Q sub S, then we're talking about the amount supplied at all price levels. And it is that amount that the seller is willing and able to sell. The seller might be willing to sell a product, but if they don't have the ability, then there is no supply. Likewise, they may be able to sell, but are unwilling to sell, and so too, we do not have supply. When we talk about the law of supply and that relationship between price and quantity supplied, we will, on the demand side, we said that it was a negative or an inverse relationship, meaning that if prices go up, quantity demanded goes down. The law of supply is the opposite. There is a positive relationship between price and quantity. The higher the price, the more that the seller is willing and able to sell. And so the market, when we talk about market, we'll talk about that, how that comes together when, as the price goes up, the buyer wants to buy less and the seller wants to sell more, and how that interaction, how they interact with this knowledge, with this information, is the study of economics. If you will remember the demand schedule earlier, we have the same thing on the supply side. The relationship between price and quantity is given in the form of a table, which we call the supply schedule. And in this example, we have the price of lattes and the quantity supplied, the amount that a seller is willing and able to sell, And as you can see, that when we go from $3 to $6 in $1 increments, then the amount supplied, the quantity supply, increases from 0 to 18. And when we take the supply schedule and plot out the supply schedule on a graph, we have the supply curve. And to confirm that the supply curve, that the law of supply exists, that there's a positive relationship, we will see that the supply curve is upward sloping. This confirms the positive relationship between price, which is on the vertical axis, and quantity supplied, which is on the horizontal axis. So as you can see, as the price increases, the quantity supplied also increases. And so that is demonstrated in an upward sloping curve. And again, remember that for theoretical purposes, the curve is a straight line, but the reality of it is that it is a curved line, which is why we call it a supply curve. but it's in theory, we, for simplicity's sake, we make the curve a straight line. When we have one seller, we will talk about market structure again later in the semester. When we have one seller, that's called a monopoly, and the seller is a monopolist. We're not going to speak to that right now. Again, remember, our assumption right now is that we're in a perfectly competitive industry, meaning there are many buyers and many sellers. So when we talk about an individual seller's supply curve, that's individual supply. But when we add up all of the individual suppliers within an industry, that the sum total of their supply is what we call the market supply, or market quantity supplied. In this example, we're still working with lattes. We have Starbucks and we have Jitters. And here is this is the market supply schedule. And what we see is that when the price is free, no one is willing or able to sell lattes. And then as we increase the price to $6, we also increase the quantity supplied. And if you compare the market to the individual, you will see that the market supply is greater than either individual supplier, because it is the sum total of all suppliers. Pay attention to our market supply here, because when we take the market supply and we add the price to create a the market supply schedule, and then we plot out those points, again we see that the supply curve, the market supply curve, is upward sloping, meaning there's a positive relationship between price and quantity. And we also see that it is going to be further out than the individuals, because this is the sum of all sellers in that market. This concludes the first portion, the supply portion of our lecture. The next segment deals with those factors which causes a shift in the supply curve. I look forward to speaking to you soon.